Well, hello and welcome to episode 125 of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast with me, Scott Casson-Rennie, and
Al Coates. How the hell are you? How the hell are you?
Yeah, I know. It's been like a whole summer, more or less.
I don't think we've had a live podcast since, like you and me, since the beginning of August, maybe. That's months, weeks, years away. There's so much. It's funny though,
because wait till we get into that. But it just feels like we were doing loads, and then we both got really kind of fatigued. And I was remembering last year we went all through the summer. We didn't stop at all because we normally have a bit of a break in the summer, don't we?
Yeah.
But because of that silly pandemic thing that happened. And it's still here.
It's still here.
We decided just to plod on to give people a little bit light relief of an evening or of a weekend. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, we did quite a lot. So I think we were well deserved to have the break. However, the break has been like, where's Al? Where's my friend Al? Where is he? Al.
Someone spilled something. Can I blame it on? Who can I blame it on? Al's not here. Someone's broke something. I totally understand it.
Yeah.
Just before we start, this is being billed as our swearing episode, so let me just say at the very outset, we are going all in on this. We are not going to hold back.
Nope.
We've got a few news items, but we're going to get to the swearing. So there's an explicit rating.
Yeah.
If delicate ears are still listening, turn it off.
Yeah.
If just turn it off, because it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, all I would say is if you're into adoption and fostering and that's why you're listening, then you shouldn't really have delicate ears. But if you do, then
you need to think about your life choices. If you've got delicate ears and you're into adoption and fostering, you need to have a very serious word with yourself.
Yes, you do.
So maybe we should have So are we saying from now on all bets are off with the language?
Yes, we are. Although I do need to mind myself because you know that I could make a sailor blush sometimes, and I do calm myself down when I'm in public. I do, I do, because it's very rare that I use any bad language around you or your family. But like it's an audience thing. I know when not to do it, but sometimes it slips out. So
right. So. From now on, all bets are off. If you've got this far beyond this serious warning and you are offended by me calling Scott a pardon
and I think that's the first time I've ever been called that by you. So that has made me laugh.
I apologise.
I've been called worse.
I don't, if there's any sort of feminist issues around that, I apologise, but it's just a good demonstration of the language that we're used to from our kids. Shall we get on with the news before we get under the swearing?
That's tame. Yeah, go on. But that is tame. But go on, yeah.
Right, firstly, I think I've probably just lost my registration. I really might have just lost my registration. I apologise. I mean, we literally gave an explicit warning, so I'm feeling really funny.
Yeah, and if you apologise for every single word that you're going to say, then we're going to just be a podcast full of apologies. So yeah,
yeah, I calm myself. Right, get a grip of myself.
Right. Yes, give yourself a shake. Yeah,
and just when the Social Work England Committee are listening to this, I'd just like to apologise. And you can right, competition.
You can do a special edition for them where you bleep it all out. So don't worry about
absolutely. Yeah, an alternative will be available for those with delicate ears. Right, we put a competition for Amber Elliott's book, The Super Parent.
We did. And, we did.
I'm trying to think where it is. Yeah, it's still on the corner of my desk. So we had quite a few people got in touch, and I rather than get you to pick a number, because I have problems with picking numbers, because if I said to you pick a number between 1 and 50, you're never going to pick number 1 and you're never going to pick number 50.
That's very true.
It is. So I have got the facility of a random number generator off Google.
I like them. They're fun.
Yeah, that shows a window into your home life, doesn't it? Come on, kids.
I know, yeah.
See if you can guess the random number.
It's less hassle than Monopoly, believe me.
Less sweary. Anyway, we'll move on that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to press the random number generator, and then I'm going to press it now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. It shows 0, which is really random. Anyway, it shows the number 3, and according to my list of people who were just put down in a random way, we have got someone called Helen. I won't give any more details of that, who was messaged the page. So Helen, if you're listening, you have won. And by the time you get this podcast, you probably know that, because I'll message you and she will get the book. It'll be winging its way out to her. And that's very exciting. So well done, Helen. There you go. Great book. Read it, buy it, whatever.
Yeah. Well, she can't buy it because she's got a new one. I'm just getting a free one, but yeah.
Oh, that's true. It's true.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right. News items.
News. Off the press. Well, it is today, because today isn't Saturday when the podcast comes out. But there's been a reshuffle.
Oh.
A cabinet reshuffle.
We've still got the same children's minister, though, haven't we?
Well, we think we do. She hasn't tweeted for a couple of days, and I haven't seen anything saying the opposite. So...
they're probably wrestling the machine out of her hand, going, no!
Yes. Well, I think how this has all been decided is through arm wrestling anyway. It's like, right, next up, 2 competitors. So here you go, Gavin Williamson, you're up against Nadeem Zahawi. And off they went.
Yeah. I've met Nadeem Zahawi.
Yeah, so have I. When he was children's minister.
Oh, I found him to be genuine.
It was an interesting one when it all happened, because he took over from Robert Goodwin, didn't he? Do you remember him?
Please, I know it's the sweary episode. It's not the slander episode.
No, but do you remember? Because Al nearly had him on the podcast, and a week later he disappeared off the face of the earth. Yeah, that would have been an interesting one. So he took over from him, didn't he? And he was quite... I thought it was an interesting time, because we'd gone from Ed Timpson to some kind of, I don't want to say unknowns, but they were kind of lesser known MPs, I think. But they weren't quite so big names, were they?
Well, forgive me, but there was a pregnant MP that was on maternity leave that took over the role.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Do you remember over the summer? So then it was Robert Goodwin.
Right. Yeah. Who was there maybe for about 3 days. And then Nadeem Zahawi came along. Now, he's obviously been the vaccination minister, hasn't he, for however long that's been a role. And I would say that's probably coming to an end, because it doesn't need the same kind of thing. So he's probably needed a new job. So I think it's an interesting appointment, because I wouldn't say it was... Well, yeah, but I wouldn't say he was children's minister long enough for us to get a real gauge on, I know that him and his family were... kind of, what's the word? Oh, I can never remember the blooming word. When he came from another country. Yeah, they were refugees, yeah. So I think he's got an understanding of some of the kind of issues. So it'll be interesting to see, and we tweeted from the podcast this morning congratulating him, and looking forward to... Yes, we did. And looking forward to hearing his plans, although I know education is quite wide, but, the schools minister is gone or changed as well. Nick Gibb's gone, isn't he? He's gone.
I don't know. Never had any warm, fluffy feelings about Nick Gibb.
No. Well, politicians. But I will say Nadeem Zahawi does seem, well, time will tell. As with all of these appointments, time will tell. They're never going to get everything right, are they? So, but I do hope that, he remembers kind of, the position that he holds to enable some things to happen.
Yeah, I mean that was a bit of a word salad. I'm not sure what you meant.
It was, yeah, I know, yeah. Well, I do you know what? In my head, I was segueing into the next bit about the thing that you went to this week, because you went to a thing this week, didn't you?
I did go to a thing. Anyway, the only thing I guess I haven't got nothing to add about Nadeem Zahawi. I think time will tell. I think that I think he's quite a convincing individual. We'll see. But I mean, the nature of being a politician is that you are a convincing individual. So
that's how you get votes.
That's how you get votes. So I got an invite. I don't know how I got an invite. It just appeared in my email, and it said, "Would you like to come to the APPG meeting on adoption?"
It was free to attend. You know that. Anybody could go.
Let me down gently. Why don't you?
If I hadn't been at work, I would have been there as well. So
I just really thought I was special getting an invite. It was open to the public. Oh. Yeah. Honestly, sometimes I feel like such an idiot. That's really poor, isn't it? So I went to that, and it was interesting because they've done a report all through the pandemic. But looking at adoption support, really, adoption and permanence, and looking at the issues around that, and kind of releasing this report, which they'd done. They'd held public hearings, hadn't they? And they'd invited lots of people in, so adopters around education, around a whole raft of different things. So, I went along. I mean, it's an interesting report. It's online if you go to the APPG adoption and early permanence kind of their website. They've got it there. Adoption UK were trailing quite a lot. Home for Good were trailing it quite a lot. I think Home for Good are the Secretariat. Is that the right?
Yeah, Home for Good and Adoption UK. Yeah, they do a joined up thing on that. So yeah.
Oh, you're so knowledgeable in these things, aren't you?
I know. I keep my ear to the ground. What can I say?
The word on the street.
Aye.
That I know. So I went along to that, and that was interesting because I think that it was. I mean, I don't know about you, but I try not to be cynical, and I try not to just kind of hold this view of like everything's rubbish and that nothing's good and there's nothing new to the sun. But I have to say that it felt very much like in stuff that we've all heard before, the improving stability for adopted children. That's what it was called. Strengthening families, improving stability for adopted children 2021. And there was a lot, I mean, it's a worthwhile read and it's a lot there, but actually we're coming back to the same things again, the strong foundations, quickly moving children into adoptive placements, cultivating relationships, acting early, the interesting, maybe the new thing there was about recognizing evolving needs of children. But it all felt, this idea that, the children that are placed at 2 are not the children at 6 and not the children at 16, certainly not the children at 16. I think the key element around this is the timing, that this was the moment where it was to feed into the care review. I think that's probably why it was released.
Yes.
But nothing new.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, it's almost like it's just... like you say, nothing new, and what the report probably sounds like just the same stuff, but just rewritten from previous stuff, which I know isn't the case because they will have, they have done consultations and they have got feedback and all that sort of stuff, and that's all good. I think that time will tell really, and if it's feeding into the care review, then let's see, because that's an interesting thing as well.
Wow, you're on fire today.
I'm saying no more than that about that because I'm not getting involved in any discussions about the care review anymore.
Well, it's made me think about whether we want to get him back on when he comes with his answers. Josh McAllister, because I thought, do I really want the hassle? I
know, me as well. I think we probably do. But we'll moan about it like bitches when it happens.
Oh, get you with your... embracing the new environment where swearing.
I know, yeah.
And of course, that is anyway, I'm not going to get there. You can have your own regulator on that. And I think the care review remained. It's kind of just I don't know whether all care reviews. I've never been through one before. So are all care reviews kind of contentious all the way through? That's something I think. No, I don't think anybody can, because I think that the kind of social media aspect has made it what it is in terms of that thing. I mean, whether we've had one before, I wouldn't have a clue. But I think that having a public platform to be able to, question, analyze, review, feedback, all that sort of stuff, I think that's obviously a new thing, and I'm sure it must have happened in other quarters where they've reviewed, other areas of government policy and all that sort of stuff. But I think that this is potentially one of the first times that we've been able, or people who have care experience, and all the people that we know and we've talked to and who've kind of contacted us or tagged us and stuff on Twitter, they have the ability to use that voice. But what I find interesting is that the public platform seems to be the kind of the lead into it. And in actual fact, I've read lots of stuff where people who are care experienced who don't use social platforms like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, they don't have, they weren't aware of it. They don't know about it. And there's no door to get in because that's the door, isn't it?
Yeah, and
social media.
You know, the social media thing. You know, people who use social media are kind of up to speed on stuff. They'll read, you know, article. Not, you know, we're all at different levels on that. You know, me, unless it's got a pop up in it, I'm not interested. But you know, if social media people are quite savvy in terms of how they use it and what they use it for. So you know, but they're only one part of that kind of community. So I think that's a little bit disappointing, but I mean, I would imagine that there's no register of previously. Well, actually, there probably is in terms of some of these groups that exist. You know, there's a number of groups that exist that, you know, would have contact details for people, and I'm sure that they must have communicated with them. But there's still going to be hundreds of thousands of people who haven't got a clue what it is or where it's come from.
I mean, that really segues into a really interesting point about individuals, because actually, like you say, if you're a member of, say, the Care Experience community, through like maybe Become, great charity, or Adoption UK or whoever, then unless you're a member of that, how do you access this? Because I think actually what is really odd, and it's sort of pinging into my mind, is that, you know, we're looking at adopter representation for, I guess, segue into what we do, adopter representation, but you're only ever going to get people who come through organisations, and that's problematic because all the organisations are adopter facing, or adopter led, or adopter originated. And
there's also a dilution. There's a dilution to the message, I feel, when it's such a big group. You know, if it's a big group of people, you get the threads and you get the main points and stuff, but actually someone, you know, 10 people out of 200 could have had a very specific experience that isn't picked up on, because the other 190 people saw that as a positive thing. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that it is diluted, and I'm not saying that, you know, it's kind of missed out, but what I'm saying is the focus wouldn't be on those 10 people because the other 190 experienced a different thing. But actually, for those 10 people, that could have been the big thing that's, you know, impacted on them for the rest of their life.
And if it is 10 people and it's 10%, then it's maybe missed because they didn't, maybe they can't articulate, or they don't. And I think that's, representation is really complicated, isn't it? Because I know that we've been part of Adopter Voice for years, haven't we? In different, you set up Adopter Voice, Bluminick, you set up National Adopter Voice.
I know.
As you do.
I did.
You did.
Just click my fingers and there it was.
I think you just thought it into being. I think that's one of the problems with Adopter Voice, is that and it's not Adopter Voice. There's no problems with Adopter Voice. It's just, how do you get the views of a community? And same with Adopter. Because I know that when we, you know, like I go to the meetings, and I am part of Adopter Voice in the sense that I said I would be it, because
they're almost like the secretariat for it, aren't they? Really, but there's a couple of us who are independent, because I stayed on after I left Adoption UK because I wanted to stay on as independent, because I think that, you know, no offense to Adoption UK, but when I worked for them, I had a very kind of specific message, and, you know, was representing Adoption UK and Adopter Voice, whereas, you know, to just be representing myself and people that I speak to daily, you know, other adopters, other families, adoptees, you know, that's where the independent side should come into it, because I think that, you know, that's undiluted. And if there's an important message to share, you know, whether it's around the forum of a meeting, or whether it's, you know, in written feedback where, you know, we've had a specific thing come to us, which, you know, we both get all the time, don't we? I think that's a key part of it. And I don't think that there's, you know, I don't think there's an issue with having large groups, but I do think that, you know, in terms of representation, it needs to be a mix. You know, it's like the adopted parents have got I've got the ears of the people who can develop, help, all that sort of stuff, and that's quite a, how do I put this? It's through experience of being parents. It's not necessarily experience of being adopted, although some adopted parents are adoptees as well. So the messages are really, because we've been so used to, you know, what's the word I'm trying to be very delicate with the wording that I use, because I don't want to upset any adoptees, but I think that we have spent the last 10, 15 years advocating for our children so much that we have found our kind of way to be able to word things and deliver things in an acceptable fashion. And I think that where the adoptee community is concerned, because they're so passionate about it and it's personal experience, that they've, they just word things in a different way. So it's where's the compromise in that, to be able to bridge that gap and say, because I think we all know, whether we're parents or professionals or politicians or decision makers, that the experience of those people is so valid, so important. But it's where do we meet in the middle in terms of being able to understand it? They may not have said it the way that we would want them to say it. However, that is how they need to say it to make that impact, because that's how they see it. So it's a bit rambly, I know. But sorry.
No, I think that I think it's a really valid point that actually we've spent, like I've spent a lot of time cultivating a voice that is palatable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anything, I mean, you've probably noticed I've been a bit active on Twitter, a bit fighty.
A wee bit. Boredom, clearly.
Clearly, there's not enough things happening in my life. I need to, fill the gaps.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But there's that tension, isn't it, between pushing too far that you become like unbearably pointy, or being remarkably bland. And yeah. And so I think when I look at new voices coming through, but we see that there are voices in the community. There are groups, organisations like peer support groups that people, their voices, what they're saying is right.
Yeah,
it's unpalatable.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to go into that as well. Yeah, because we know of a lot of the groups that we support, massively support them. But the biggest complaint is that they're not listened to, and they're not listened to because it's, like you say, it's not palatable. It's not delivered in such a way where people are going to kind of engage. Because that's fundamentally, not where these people sit. So yeah. Ooh, didn't expect us to go there.
No, I mean, it's really pertinent now, because I think there's a push for the adopter reference group on Twitter. Krish Kandaya has promised that we would have an adoptee reference group, and who is in that group is just critical.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
We'll wait and see. I know there's lots of conversations going on about how you people get into that group, but again, it feels really patriarchal or matriarchal for us as adopters to go, I think we should have that person. I think we should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It makes your skin crawl.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. And, and also, like people suggesting who should be part of it, it's a bit wrong, isn't it? It should be an open application process. They'll probably be inundated, but you know what? Good, and, maybe someone like Become should be, kind of the secretariat for that, rather than somewhere like Quorum or Adoption UK, or, it needs to be young person or care experienced or adoptee experience. It needs to be an organisation that actually does that role, rather than, the kind of the adult. I know what you're saying.
What
I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really valid. Whether that'll happen, I don't think that'll happen.
I mean, no, I don't think so either.
But because it's really, because I use a really good example is there's people that and probably people you've spoken to in relation to doing a podcast, have come on, they've told the stories, we had a conversation with them before and afterwards, and you think, I know you, there's so much we agree on, and then I might see them on Twitter and go, that's a bit sharp. But actually, I know they're all right. Mm-hmm. That's too far. Yeah. For me, I'm not comfortable with that. But actually, I know the person. I think, but I know that they're. Yeah. I trust them. May not agree with everything.
I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, yeah.
But if you don't know that person, then you're gonna go, they're an angry adoptee, or they're an angry adoptee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know.
And
it's a bit unfair. It's a bit unfair, but when you've only got 280 characters, you need to get your message across, don't you? So, whereas if you're on the podcast for an hour, you can,
do this.
Exactly.
There's so much stuff. There's so many things I'd like to talk about, but I feel like we need to get on with this. What is affectionately known as the No Shit Sherlock podcast. So, a little backstory to how this came about is that there was a rather interesting article released over the summer. And I read it and went, oh, that's interesting. And so the article was, let's be frank, it was, I'm just looking for it, from the National Institute for Health Research. Shock horror, 3rd of August. Adopted children may develop specific types of post-traumatic stress. That tells you everything you need to know. And
wasn't that when we went, no shit, Sherlock?
Well, I sent it to you, and you went, and you just texted me back and went, no shit, Sherlock, and kind of moved on, just like what the hell? So it's research to say that, children who experience really shocking, terrible things go on to have post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. And I mean, this has come up, that article came out, and I've been doing a little bit on my work side about this as well. And it just struck me actually, because we went through the process of having an assessment for PTSD for one of my children. I'm not going to say which one because that'd be unfair. But what was really interesting was that he fell outside of the spectrum, I think it is, because there is a spectrum to this, isn't it? Or there's a kind of, whatever.
Diagnostic kind of framework. Yeah, you've got to tick so many boxes or...
Yeah. And he fell just outside it. And what was interesting about that article and the research that has recently been done by, I think it was Cardiff University, have done some research on it, is that they may not fall within the assessment framework because of their experiences being so unique. Now that's just my kind of take from it. So I thought it was really, really interesting. And I would say that anybody who's experienced that kind of trauma and loss will have some form of PTSD. And I'm no professional in that, obviously. I'm not a trained psychologist or, psychotherapist or whatever, but it just seems bloody obvious.
But it is bloody obvious. But I think if we talk about it in terms of risk, as opposed to they will, I think that the risks are just so high for that. It's like, but I mean, my head, I think that if you anecdotally speak to any adoptive parent of any length of time, they'll go, yeah, of course. All this stuff, all of this stuff casts a shadow. Yeah. But until you put it into a research article, it's not true. It's just anecdote. So I get why they made it.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So from there, you went, no shit, Sherlock, and I went, and I just said, we should do a swearing episode because I've got some cracking stories about swearing. I find swearing really difficult because you know me, that I'm not a swearer.
You're not. No, you're not.
I was, and then when I was a young man, I became a Christian and I stopped swearing. Right, so that was part of the culture. I was in a group of people who didn't swear. Yeah. However, then I adopted some children. And a couple of things happened. One was my social network kind of was broken by the, and then just slowly I really struggle when children swear. I mean, I just do. I don't know about you, but culturally, when I was growing up, children don't swear. I don't know about you. Was that the same in your house?
I got a clout if up to the age of 18, if I even a word slipped out, my dad would clout me round the lug, and he literally would as well. I'm not making that up. I would literally get a smack round the lug hole.
It was a different time,
and then told not to fucking do it again. So that that was the way it was, wasn't it? It was fine for our parents to have a swear or grandparents, but it's I guess it's a generational thing, isn't it? Because if you said to a child now you're supposed to respect your elders, they would go, what does that mean? I don't know what that means, because that's not something that we kind of. But that's that. I think
that image of you being anyway. But absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not being funny. You've met my aunt, my dad's sister.
I've met her.
And you've met her. You've heard her as well.
She would literally make a pirate blush, that woman. Yeah,
she definitely would. She's lovely, but yes, she definitely has a tendency to have a swear word in every sentence. So that's the way I was brought up. And me and my brother used to, we would respect the fact that we weren't allowed to swear. And then I always remember the first time I did swear as an adult. And it was just, I don't know what, it was quite a tame word. It wasn't like anything extreme. And I was told off by my dad. He didn't clown me that time, but I was told off by him about swearing in front of my mum. I wasn't allowed to swear in front of my mum. And I think that's an interesting thing as well, because again, generational thing, respect, all those sorts of things that come into it. So I'm like you. I swear. I am a swearer.
Oh, yes.
I do tend not to swear with you and your family for some reason. I think it's because I respect it. That's not a thing for you. And I find myself when I'm messaging you, and we like you use bliddy and all that sort of stuff rather than bloody. And I tend to find myself doing that. But sometimes I'm just like, oh, FFS on a text, or fuck off, Al, or whatever, not in a nasty way, just like
a term of endearment.
Yeah, you can tell that Al is like really struggling with this one because he's just laughing every time I swear. But
I think that it's really interesting, because I think that my experience of fostering adoption is that it opens this world, and we bring children in, and there's this preconceived idea that the children will kind of fall into the culture that we've developed, or like you grew up in an environment where children don't swear, and if you do, you get adults can swear all the time. My parents didn't swear particularly, maybe the odd shit, but never the F-bomb, never the F-bomb. But if I'd have sworn, I wouldn't be here now. It's my mother would have thrashed me within an inch of my life. So then I remember the first time so this is a long time ago, and we were driving, and this isn't swearing really, but so my eldest was about 5, just 6, and we were driving home, and it was the first weekend my mother had come up to meet, so it was, we were doing all those introductions, happy grandma.
Oh yeah.
Kirsty, this little voice from the back seat saying, honestly, if we didn't get back soon, I'm going to piss my knickers. And honestly, she's 6, and I thought, I'm literally going to have a heart attack. For one, it's not language that we would use. Like, that's not how 6-year-olds talk in my family. But in front of my mother as well, I thought I was going to have a cow. And it's progressively got worse since then. Basically. I
think the accent and that word together just really was like, that was bang on, and the word. And but that would be my experience as well. So actually, one of my children, they thought had Tourette's, and they were going to be sending for an assessment for Tourette's. He seemed to have a love of the F-bomb. In any circumstances, just come out. Bearing in mind, he was 7 when he was placed with us, and that had been on the kind of that, and the other assessments had been on the kind of back burner for about 3 years before that. So from the age of 4, he's going around telling everybody to fuck off, and it kind of
that messes with your head.
I know.
Well,
it is. Yeah. And I always remember the first time that it happened, he decided it was going to be in school in front of the head teacher. Because like when he was settling in, I mean, he had an EHCP for all of his school career, and amazingly taught the school a lot about children who experience trauma and attachment problems, and that's the positives that came out of it. But the negatives were those phone calls, and that's where my kind of triggers come from when the school rings my phone, because of these sorts of instances. So he decided that he was going to use 2 words. Because the head teacher had him in the office, and he was hiding under the little chair in the office, and she was trying to coax him out, blah blah, and basically it got to the point where he said, "You're a fucking wanker" to the head teacher, head mistress, shall we say? The reason I'm saying head mistress is because he used the word wanker to a lady, so he obviously didn't really understand the words that he was using, and how, he didn't really get them. Once she stopped laughing, she obviously had to pick up the phone to let us know. So we were called into school, and we had to sit and have a chat about it, and about this kind of language stuff. And we also felt that should really kind of let them know what a wanker was, because it's not really the sort of thing you call a lady.
It's making my skin
and that's where to be fair, that's where it started, and it's never gotten much better since then. So, but I do remember, and this is again part of the generational thing, and what we were brought up like. I remember Tris said to him when we got home, "Okay, this is what we're going to do. You're going to go into the garden, and you're going to scream at the top of your lungs that word all you like until it's all out," kind of thing. Naive parents, probably 3. 3 weeks after they were placed, going, oh, I know how to fix this. I can do this just by doing that. Because, literally we would have got a clout. And that would have been it. But, so we tried this approach. To be fair, he got it, he understood it, and he kind of didn't use it very rarely in school anyway. But when he did, it was always like the crackers. And like I say, I think that was kind of the first time that we realised actually our idea that we weren't going to parent the same way our parents did. It came through because we'd always said that we'd take the positives, but we'd leave the negatives of being parented by our parents.
Yeah.
So as an example, being open, honest about sex education and all that sort of stuff, that was never something in the 80s that, no, it just wouldn't have been a thing. I remember my dad running for miles to get away from me, asking him, asking him, well, yeah, I mean, I just studied biology when I went to high school, and I was like, oh, I know how to get you. I'll get you back for all those years that you were away during the week. So I asked him, and he ran. He literally ran 10 miles to get away from me. Yeah. So that was kind of the first time that I understood that I was going to have to do this very differently, because I'm parenting somebody else's child, and they've come with ideas and language and all that sort of stuff that I wouldn't have used it as a child, but I could potentially teach them the time and the place and what why and where, all that sort of stuff. So, and that's where it all started, I think, in terms of alternative parenting or reflective parenting or whatever you want to call it. That's where it all started.
Well, I mean, there's some interesting stories here. So the one is
there's some brilliant ones. I love it.
Some people send some ones in.
I love it.
Someone saying SP has got form with swearing. So this is we ask people to tell us their stories.
This is like the one for me. Yeah.
And SP has got form with swearing from before he were with us, and for the first year he got home, I was getting him dressed once for school one morning, and he called me wanker pants. Won't lie, I had to turn away with the giggles, and once the giggles had subsided, it's my favourite insult ever. Second is the time he waited 15 minutes in the car at park at a very nice school, National Trust Place. He wouldn't stop shouting, Minch. I'd forgotten this. Just got to it.
You'd forgotten about the minge word, hadn't you?
Yeah. I mean,
there's a few emojis after that. The shock emoji, the eyes hidden emoji, the face palm emoji.
I mean, it reminds me of the story my friend told me about. She was a teacher. She was doing a teacher training, and she was at a school in like a kind of a council estate in middle of Newcastle, kind of a deprived area. And they would give like a reception group of kids, and so they were going through the story of the Three Little Pigs. So it's like listening time. All the kids are sat there, like really good and proper. And the teacher got to the part where the wolf comes to the door, and he huffs and he puffs and he blows the house down. And this little voice from the back went, "The bastard." And you go, well, you can't really argue with that. It's true. My older children were really quite okay with swearing. I mean, they didn't swear. They just didn't. They kind of like, but my younger children, I remember the first time the F-bomb was dropped in our house. So this is like, she was 4 years old, and she called her sister a fuck. And like the whole family just like took a... For one, where has she got it from? So that maybe looking at older siblings when parents is not around. Yeah. And I remember I thought, right, this is my moment. And I think, so when this was 2010, 2011, maybe I was just a newly training social worker, so I was like full on. And I sat down with her and I sort of said, look, these are not words we use. This is not a nice way of talking to people. And I said, there's a rule. We made it really simple that you can use the words we use. And so we just didn't swear in front of them. Then it makes it simple. There's black and white. Why is it you have a rule and I don't have a rule? Made it really simple. That's probably why we don't swear. And I remember Paula was listening, and she went, "You did really well there," because I was like really calm and collected, and the child went, "Oh yes, that's absolutely fine." Next day, lost her temper. She looks at me and she goes, "You're a fook." She's forgotten how to say it because she's only 4, and she followed me around, and we took her out, and she was walked 10 paces behind me, shouting, "Fook, fook, fook, fook." Fook, me through Sainsbury's car park going, I can't believe this. And she did this for 45 minutes round Sainsbury's car park, through the park. So there's all the people having nice time, and she's going, Fook, you're a Fook. And I just thought, I found that like just overwhelmed, because I thought, I don't know how you get to that in your head. How does a child get to that? It's just bonkers. And then she forgot,
Yeah, the worrying thing is I can imagine exactly which one of your children it was as well.
Bless her.
Yeah. I mean, having moved to Ireland is really interesting. It's a little bit like, now, not everybody in Scotland is like this, but my experience of growing up in Scotland was that swearing was kind of, within every sentence. And the circles that my dad worked in, certainly, most of his work colleagues, they worked on their own. They drove lorries up and down, from Scotland to England and Wales and all those places. So they were on their own most of the time. So when they were, in company, they probably forgot they were in company a little bit. And, they used to use some kind of very flamboyant, expressive language, shall we say. But moving to Ireland, very similar in terms of, I'd say Irish cursing. So there's a few kind of alternatives, should we say, that can be used. So as an example, instead of the word fuck, they would say feck. And feck is deemed as not a swear word.
Like
I would call it a swear word. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I would say that. What I find very interesting about Ireland is it's fine when you're in school for teachers to say, for feck's sake. But if a child was to use the same phrase, it would automatically get them banished from the classroom or, whatever. So I think there is a lot in there about words that we use, or a teacher uses or something like that. And, I know it's very different. It's a very different kind of thing, because what I've also found moving to Ireland is you can be listening to the radio in the car. So if I'm driving somewhere, you've got the radio on, and there's a certain program, there's a couple of programs actually, and they actually do swear on the radio. So they will say things like shit or bloody or, stuff like that. Now that to my ears is just like, yeah, that does as well. Because if it was the UK and that was on radio or TV, there would be an instant apology from the presenter. And then, Ofcom would be like sitting there ready to type.
There'd be committees and forms and courses.
Exactly. So what I've found is that certainly, I've got 2 adult children, like you have 3 adult children and 1 on their way, is that we, personally, my 2 adult children never stop swearing. And I have to sometimes remind them there's a time and a place for the language that they use. But what really bugs me, and again, same experience as you, where does it come from? Now, my youngest son has all the trappings of an Irishman, shall we say?
Has he embraced
he has embraced
local culture?
Yeah, he has, yes. It's not as regular as it could be, but as you'd imagine, in a bit of a fit of a rage or a temper, it can come out. We've been called the C word a couple of times, and there's been no regrets about being called that from him. But it is different. It's a different culture, I would say, and it's not, something that I would be used to, shall we say. And I think that, when we've gone into school, as an example in Ireland, we've taught them about swearing, because it's a real issue. You're not allowed to swear at teachers. Now, some of that comes down to the religious aspect of education, because, he goes to a Catholic school. Yeah. It's not a Catholic school, but it's, it's kind of a Catholic school. So part of it is that, and part of it is also this traditional kind of respecting in schools in Ireland. Now, that is changing, I will say that, and especially in his school, it is definitely changing, because we said to them, if you can get him to stop swearing, then can you let us know how you're doing it? Because we would love to be able to do that as well. And just giving them an insight into the fact that, this isn't something that just, is just happening because he wants to swear.
It's not a choice or poor behaviour.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a way of expression. And it really is, I think. And if you're encouraging that expression by living in the position that, you hear it. So you hear feck from a teacher as you're passing their classroom. They're going to pick up on that. They're going to use it.
It's a complicated message, isn't it, for a child to kind of differentiate between appropriate and not appropriate. And for our children, it's that I guess so often social and emotional stuff can be not at the right level, or just confused by, like the report, No Shit Sherlock report.
Yeah.
That actually this stuff doesn't matter. But I think it's just interesting, isn't it, that response that adults have to children swearing, and sometimes it's just like, I guess it's incidental swearing, like, oh, that bloody dog, or that effing. I can't even say it. I'm pathetic.
No, you can't. You can't bring yourself to.
But I think
you're a weak man, Coates.
I'm a weak man. I'm morally, emotionally, psychologically very weak. But I think that I do training, and we do training about challenging behaviour, and often I kind of purposely will swear in it, because I think that we can talk about this stuff hypothetically, but the visceral response. So I use the example of one of my children once called me a bald, noncy cunt. Right? And it literally... Shocked. Right, not just once, repeatedly. And I had a visceral reaction to all of that, because there's a whole... It's very creative. Some of it factual, some of it fabricated.
Yes, I would say. It was an NVR attack, really, wasn't it? It was a shit sandwich.
It was a shit sandwich. And I just... I remember just going... It was like a punch in the face. It wasn't, but it felt like, oh, you're kind of taking me to a place in my head. I don't know where to respond, because that's just because swearing is at the worst. It's horrible. But it all depends on the intent of the person behind, isn't it? Because you and I can call each other all the names under the sun.
Yeah.
But we trust that we actually are for each other and we like each other. But when it comes with such vitriol, you kind of... And so often I'll do it in, I've sort of, it's a little bit of an experiment in my head. I'll talk to groups of people and go, I am, sometimes our children swear and everyone goes, oh yeah. And I'll go, yeah, my daughter called me a bald noncy cunt. And everyone goes, and I go, yeah, and that's how it feels. And people in the room who've experienced that go, oh my goodness, it's not just me. And I mean, I went to the Home for Good, such a nice Christian organisation. I was asked to speak about challenging behaviour, and I got way ahead of myself. And I said, sometimes my daughter calls me a prick, and you could have heard a pin drop in the room. There's 1,000 people there, and I thought we were going to get a shepherd's crook and pull me off, because I'd kind of. But that's the reality. People living in a community where swearing isn't done, and they're living with a child who's swearing, and they don't know where to park that. And
that's true.
Messes with people's heads.
Yeah, and some of the messages we got were interesting, because we get messages from some of the usual crowd, which is lovely. We sometimes get new ones, but Simon Armstead, he has faith, shall we say? He's quite a believer, and he tweeted and said, he replied and he said, the language my children use is nothing compared to the language of between two adoptive dads and me on a bad hair day when things get really tough. Thank goodness you've never seen our DMs. Sometimes I shot myself, but it doesn't have to feel good to get it all out. Yeah. And then there's the other one is Quiverful Mummy, who I know very well. We'll call her M. And she said, we wondered, and again, Faith, we wondered if our little one had Tourette's, but she means every word. So, there is this like community within a community that wouldn't normally, but actually are accepting of the fact that it happens. And I guess we all need to come to terms with it, and that community needs to come to terms with it happening. So I think that, whilst you probably caused, some furore at the Home for Good thing, I think that's a message that needs to be heard, because it happens. It doesn't matter whether you've got, whether you believe in God or dinosaurs. It's something that's going to happen regardless. Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to care either way if they want to swear. So it's an interesting part of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that. I mean, I don't think you should include it in preparation groups, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that the visceral impact of being swore at is just really difficult, isn't it? And I found it really hard. We had an incident where Paul and I had gone away for the weekend, so my mum was looking after, and my mum rang and she said, "Look, it's kicked off here. Can you help?" And so it was good in one way, because my mum had finally seen what a kick-off looked like. But I could hear this foul language coming towards my mother, and I kind of was like, I just well, my mum's like, at the time she was maybe 70, and I was going, my mum's, this is so far out of my mum's experience of the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm, maybe I've got a naive idea of my mum. But actually just go, oh, that's awful. That's really upset me. That was probably the thing that upset me the most, that my children would swear at my mum.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that really pressed my buttons in ways that I just didn't even... Oh, look, a new button. My child has found a new button.
Yeah. Yes. And thankfully, they weren't there to see it was your new button because it was on the phone. But and I think, that is absolutely bang on, isn't it? Because, I think my youngest son, the first time that... Well, actually, for a long time, he was never looked after by anybody else. He didn't go to family, etc., because we just didn't think that they would be able to manage him. And the first time he did, he proved that, and his language was very choice, and he called his grandmother this, that, and the next thing. So I think that, like you with your mum, I think Nanny got a bit of an insight into what we were having to cope with, and why we hadn't been so willing for her to look after him on our own and all that sort of stuff, out of kindness really for her, because we were able to manage it. And maybe the way of her managing it is very traditional in the same respect. And that's no disrespect to the generation that is grandmothers and grandparents. That's just saying that, the shock of stuff like that happening is a shock. And unless you're living with it daily and dealing with it daily, your reactions might be very different to ours, should we say. But I think go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think that but then when you are talking to perhaps social care professionals saying my kid swears, people don't necessarily know that the visceral impact, and it kind of it can cut people to the core, like you say. Yeah, we maybe have become a bit numb to it, and a bit we've kind of well, it is what it is in the grand scheme of things. In the context of all the other stuff, fine. But like you said, like you were saying, the example of swearing at teachers, swearing at professionals, swearing at police people. Police people? Are they even things? Police officers. Yeah.
Police officers, yeah.
Police officers. And you're going to go stuff where you're going to go in, whoa, this is all, it's really just messing with the norms that I've lived in, the culture, the respect that we have just grown up in, and the way, I was brought up to respect my elders, just in a way that some of my children don't. It's just not a feature in their minds. There's no place for that. It is like they will say what they think. If they're upset, all bets are off, and that is so alien to me. It just opens up this chasm that I can't fathom. Yeah.
There was an interesting reply from Wriggles10, who is one of the kind of Mockingbird in Hertfordshire kind of leaders, if you like, the fostering
carer.
Yeah. And she said, just spent 3 days with 18 teens. God, can you imagine? 18 teenagers over 3 days. We ignored a fair amount of the choice language unless it was unkind. And as if we had been constantly pulling them up on it, there would have been little relationship building and lots of negativity. # pick your battles. And I think there is a little bit of that in there, isn't there? Yeah, and I think if you have got a group of 18, then you're going to have to expect it. But I think if you've experienced it and you've got that experience to be able to kind of deal with it like that, I think that is the way forward. I really do. Because there are ways, isn't there? And, I'm not saying you shouldn't address it. I'm just saying that,
pick your battles.
Unless it's unkind, you do need to pick your battles. And someone replied and saying that's the only way. Ignore and move on, they soon will. Yeah, there's an element of that in there as well, unless they're calling you bald nonce cunt or whatever it was that you were called. Because I think that is quite an extreme thing. I mean, I think that shocked me actually, and I'm normally unshockable with the language, but that's yeah. And then she said, although I have just given my son a talk about being the bigger boy when on WhatsApp to his friends and not using disgusting language. And I think that's an interesting thing as well, because social media, phones, texting, they can say whatever they like. They don't have to care. If they're messaging their friends and they're going, oh, my fucking parents are this and my fucking parents are that, or blah, blah. And I've seen messages like that. I've seen messages because I we have an agreement with Jacob where we just check his phone now and again just to make sure he's safe and all that sort of stuff. And some of the content would, I'm not even going to go into the sexuality thing and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I'm just talking purely about
language.
Well, that I think that's a podcast we should think about doing at some point. But just the language in itself just makes me think, oh my days. But I'm not going to say anything to him because that's communication between him and his mates. And as long as it doesn't become the norm in text messages to me or grandmother or uncle or aunt, then, it's kind of okay. Mm-hmm.
That's fair, isn't it? Because the way you and I would talk to each other when we're not recording would be different to how it is when we are, but we can make that different. And so I don't want to police my kids. No. I hate their language to their friends. Sometimes I overhear it. Sometimes they're shouting it down the phone, And it's not my language. It's not the way I would talk, but actually it's culturally probably normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And different cultures, different communities. Like you said, the Irish culture is much more flamboyant.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've been watching a program recently called Married at First Sight UK. Now, it wouldn't be your cup of tea, Al. Obviously, I don't think you watch much telly anyway, do you? But what was, and I don't wish for you to take this the wrong way, but there was a young woman who was taking part in the experiment, because they call it an experiment. And for those of you who don't know, basically it's strangers who end up going to a commitment ceremony, which they call a marriage ceremony, but it's obviously not because, legally they wouldn't be marrying a stranger, would they? Or would they? I don't know. Anyway, long story short, 9-week experiment where they meet this stranger, they get married to them, they then develop on the relationship, the honeymoon and blah, blah. So they're doing it all back to front. Anyway, there was a young female on there from Newcastle.
All right.
And what I thought was very interesting about that was that the accent was very familiar. And what I mean by that is that your family are obviously from a similar area where it's quite a strong accent. And that's all I could hear. That's all I could hear was your family using language that just felt wrong. Because I have this thing about your family being the representation for your area of the world with that accent. Yeah. So to hear something like that, now, it got so bad that actually she was asked to leave the program, the experiment, because she was quite aggressive with it. Yeah, but her language and her kind of she
tone.
Yeah, they had to have her removed by security because of her aggressive nature.
That's normal around here.
Well, that's what I was thinking. In some ways, I kind of got that because I've seen your family in action. But secondly, I thought, right, so people are watching that as a representation of the Northeast and thinking that's what people from that area are like. So this goes way further than swearing, I know, but I'm just saying that, I have a vision in my head about my family in Scotland, but that doesn't represent the whole of Scotland. Not everybody in Scotland swears, but they do feel that they're able to if they want to. So I just think representation on kind of telly and socials and, all that sort of stuff can have a bit of a kind of impact on that as well. Because, if someone had never knew anybody from Newcastle, watched that program, and then someone said they were from Newcastle, they might go, "Oh, no, I can't have that, kind of relationship or friendship." So, there's something in that as well. In the same way, not all Irish people curse, not all Irish people swear,
Absolutely.
But it's just there if they need it.
Yeah.
So why control our children on it if it's not unkind, like Rigo said, and pick your battles.
It's not targeted.
If they call you,
hurt.
I think if they're doing it to try and hurt, I think that, again, you're not going to do it when you're heightened, they're heightened, but you can have a word about it later,
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about it as well is if you're not a swearer, when you repeat it back to them, watching their face is just hilarious. I always think, especially when it's a cracker.
Oh, well, yeah, it is so complicated. And I think I've just consistently really struggled with it. I think all of my adoptive life when my children have been bad language. And I think it's just one of those other things that people have to contend with. And, like Simon says, that I now swear. To be honest with you, some of that's rubbed off. I do swear now. I don't swear in front of my children. I just don't. But behind their backs. It's probably the wrong way to say it.
Behind their backs, yeah.
Behind their backs. Oh, God, I make a pirate blush. I found myself chuntering. I swear chunter. Fucking melon farming son of a mother. But I do that around the house now when I've had an interaction. But I find it quite a helpful release.
Yeah,
you know, it can be. Yeah. It can be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What a way to go out, eh? I'll tell you, we've got it's National Adoption Week coming up, so that's all going to happen. We should probably. I don't think we've got anything to say about that, but that's coming up.
Not really.
By the time we've got Sarah Traceman coming on. Not Sarah.
Who?
Who's Sarah Traceman? Karen Treisman.
Dr. Karen Treisman, MBE.
M to the B to the E.
Yeah, another one. God,
excellent.
You all come out of the woodwork, you lot. Honestly, it's like a little club you've got going.
It is. It's an order, actually. We've also got a few other things. We've got lots planned. But I don't think that we need to go into that all now. But it's very exciting. Lots of really interesting voices.
We do. We've also got some training coming up, haven't we? So we're doing training tomorrow. We're doing managing transitions and change with children and young people tomorrow. So that's tomorrow morning. Excellent. If you didn't book it, you've missed it now because tickets are closed and we've sent out the invites, so that's happening. And then coming up, we've also got NVR Informed Parenting, haven't we? Which you and Elaine Amy are going to be doing under the No Borders training banner.
And then we're going to have a big push towards our conference, aren't we?
We are, yes. Yeah. And I for the next team meeting, I've also got on our agenda a free training event as well, because that's one thing that we always promised, that we would do the odd one now and again that would be free. So just a couple of hours of free training on some specific topic that we'll talk about that will be open to all. You just register, it's free, you turn up. If you aren't able to get there, we'll record it and we'll circulate it afterwards and all that sort of shizzle, just the way we normally do things. I could have said shit there because it's a swearing episode, but see, I said shizzle.
I felt I've sworn much more than you did on this episode.
I think you fucking did, actually. I'm not going to lie. So, you twat. This is honestly, if you're listening this far into it, I can assure you we do not speak to each other normally like this. We're just like, it's open season on here today. So there you go.
Yeah. I'm like having a literal physical reaction to all of the things that have just happened, and I need to lie down in a dark room and think long and hard about myself. I'm going to have to put, because some of that was sexualized swearing, so I'm going to have to put a note on, aren't I? That would be sexualized swearing. It's not fair, but arse.
Yeah, okay. Sexualized swearing. I've never heard anything referred to like that before, so that's interesting.
Well, it is
sexualized swearing.
But also some
What's
of it.
That mean? Do you mean referring to a body part with a term that's not perhaps deemed as nice or appropriate?
Well, I had a friend who's he's kind of a foster carer, and he said, and he's like, if you think of him in terms of like being like a bishop, like just the nicest person that ever lived, and wouldn't even think a swear word. That's the sort of person who, and one of his young people said to him, "Oh, you're a fucking cunt," and he went, "Well, I can't be both." And the young person stopped, and like the whole room, like time stopped, and the young person was so perplexed by the conversation that they moved on to something else. But again,
great response. So great response.
Really good response.
Yeah.
The only he could have given. But I think that obviously it's also the use of female body parts as sweary words. That's complicated.
Yeah. It is. You're right, actually. And I'd never thought about that as a specific thing. But yes, it is. You are correct, because we don't refer to male body parts in the same way, do we? We'd say cock.
Well, if I called you a dick, it's a low-level swear word, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. But it's not quite as extreme as calling someone a twat or a cunt. Let's face it, because that is that. But those are words that are meant to be very insulting. So if you call me a dick or a dickhead, I don't see that as insulting as the other two words. I'm not going to use them anymore because I feel like I've overused them now. Just within there. A prick or a cock is probably a prick is getting close to, but not not as near. Probably put that on the same par as a twat. Oh, I said I wasn't going to say it again.
So now we've got, like, this is the podcast After Dark gone really extra, how we're ranking swear words, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I could, so you get 2 dicks.
We'll get Paul Gambaccini too.
I mean, I wouldn't like to be called a dick, but I'd be really upset by a prick.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. And do you remember the podcast we did with Annalisa and Shania from Adoptee Futures? And we very briefly touched on the word queer, which, I mean, is it in the realm, in my head, is it in the realms of swearing? And I have to say, I've thought a lot about that since we recorded it. And I've had discussions with people about it as well. And I think that my head is still telling me it's not a nice word to use. So, but I'm conflicted in that because I can understand why someone might refer to themselves that way. But to me, it was an insult in the 80s. If someone said, "Oh, you're queer," in public, you know, that was a homophobic attack.
Oh yeah, it's a slur, isn't it? It's a
So I guess, and I got what Shania was saying, because she said, you know, we're reclaiming that as a name that we use for ourselves. So if someone turned around now and called Shania a queer, she'd go, "Well, yes, I am." And she'd be quite confident to be able to say, she'd be quite confident to be able to say that. And she'd say thank you. And she would say, "Thank you for recognizing that I am a queer." Which I guess is a return insult in some ways, isn't it? Because it's like, but you know, it's owning it and being able to do it. But things like that are really, you know, conflict in my head, you know, because I never see it as a nice term.
But it highlights the personal nature of language, doesn't it? Because I know that, like, to me, if someone called me queer, I'd go, it means nothing to me. There's no, you know, it's no connotation totally irrelevant. It's totally, you know, it just doesn't land because I'm not gay. You know, so it's like a nonsense swear word. But I had this conversation with one of my children, the sweary one, as she shall affect to be known. And she said to me, "Oh, you're so gay." And I went, "Oh, hang on." Which I probably wouldn't have done. Well, I just sort of stopped and went, "Whoa, hang on. It's not nice to kind of use like that as a slur because actually, you know," and I said to her, I said, "You know, Scott would call himself gay and there's nothing wrong with being Scott." Yeah. And she went, "Oh, so you don't want to be gay then?" And I went, No, I'm not gay. I don't want you to call me gay." And then she said, "Homophobe." But my head was like,
but I remember primary school early days, you know, gay was used as a different term to what it meant, and you know, boys used it. And when I got to the bottom of why they were using it, I kind of understood that. But I did say to them, you know, that when there's a double meaning for a word, you have to just be very careful. You know, some people
is everything.
Yeah, well, exactly. But you know, somebody might be offended by if they're not gay or bisexual being called gay or bisexual. In the same way that, you know, I define myself as a gay man, and I refer to myself as part of the LGBTQ plus community, but I would never use some of those words to refer to myself. You know, some women like to be called gay or they like to be called lesbian. So it's about owning who you want to be. And yes, we're going off in a little bit of a tangent with this, but like you say, language is very personal, and how you refer to yourself or it's very different. But similar to swearing, we have to accept that, you know, these words are out there and they're used, and, you know, we just kind of have to get our own heads around it, I guess.
It's picking your battles, choosing your moments, and kind of just helping the people around you to see that actually it's you know, for some of our kids, it means nothing. Yeah. And so we're getting, you know, and they kind of seeing it as something. It's just a right higgledy-piggledy mess. But I think maybe we should be invited onto preparation courses, and I could give a few examples from my list.
Yeah, so could I. Yeah, I've got a list somewhere. Maybe I'll find it. It's on the scroll. It's a wallpaper, and it's all written in font 10.
Yeah. I once went to a lecturer, and I went to a lecture when I was a social work student, And he was fantastic. It was about drugs and alcohol, and he kind of, the first thing he said, look, there's going to be a lot of fucking swearing in this fucking lecture, so you better fucking get over it. It was like, everyone went, oh, that's changed everything. And because it's a lecturer doing it, it messes with your head. It's like when it's context and all of that stuff. So because if you said that to me in a pub, or if I heard that conversation in a pub, I'd go, oh, whatever. But because it's all of that, it's just, it's fascinating, isn't it? People build their careers on the theories and knowledge of swearing. We should have read some of that. It would have been
Maybe we should have done. Yeah. Would have been more factual than just us rambling. But anyway, so just going back to the NVR, Informed Parenting, go to the website, noborderstraining.org, and you will see all the details there about it. It's with you and Elaine, Amy. It's over, is it 6 sessions?
8 sessions, 2 hours.
8 sessions.
Quite personalised, very small number of people.
Exactly, yeah. So you could really benefit from, if that suits your learning style. Yeah, exactly. And it will be quite personal and interactive with the parents that come along as well. So yeah, go there, have a look. And yes, the Adoption and Fostering Podcast Conference. Tickets are available. They're the same price as last year, so cheap as chips, just enough for me and Al to cover our coffee bill for the day, to keep ourselves awake so we can get through it. But no, there's we do have to do a little bit of stuff on that actually, because we need to expand on the speaker list, because we have got some great speakers. We've got Shania, we've got Vicky McEwen. Who else have we got? So Shania is an adult adoptee from Adoptee Futures. Who's the other one?
We've got Beth Neal's colleague, and I've embarrassed. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. That's really rubbish, isn't it? This is terrible advertising. But we've got academics. We've got David Benjamin. Is it David Benjamin? Who's David Benjamin, yeah. Who's a therapist, trauma therapist, but also an adopted adult.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a great mix there. And as ever, we will be providing the banter, and we'll be doing a bit of talking as well. We're going to do a joint session, aren't we? Rather than doing individual sessions, which people get bored with. Yeah. Because we like to banter back and forth.
Waldorf and Staten.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Well, on that note, I shall say Bon Jovi.
I would say fuck off.
Nah, you bastard.
Bastards. And Jovi.